And welcome to Climate Chat. I'm your host, Dan Miller. And today we have a special guest, Ben Carey, who's actually does a lot of things. And we're going to learn all about those. And he's based in the UK and is working on climate communications and trying to reach the public to change public opinion. And as we've talked about on this program many, many times, we have lots of climate science. We have all we need. We're going to get more, but we have all we need. We also have tons of solutions. We're going to get more of those too, but we have all we need. But we're doing essentially nothing. And so the important things to focus on are how to get the public engaged. And so that's why I'm actually thrilled to have Ben here today. So Ben, welcome to Climate Chat. And maybe you could start off by giving us your background before you got started in climate.
Got it. Yeah. Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, my background, and I work with a couple of colleagues in particular, Henrik Delehag, who's Swedish. We started off as creative directors in advertising, that very, very evil industry with much to blame for. But I guess what it really kind of taught us was just, strategic communication, how to get through to people who may not be on the same wavelength as you are, and kind of treat them with respect and listen to what they are interested in hearing and how they approach the world. So we did that for quite a while, and we've done other things too. I think at one point we got a bit disenchanted in the sense that we could see, I think, particularly during lockdown, we could see, that the world wasn't in a good way. And we were wondering how we could turn our talents to kind of helping, if possible, rather than just, selling widgets. Or I think at the time at one point we were still working on a kind of an airline client. And this is before lockdown. We spent a lot of our time jetting around the place and started wondering, well, is this really helpful to the climate, for one thing? Mm-hmm. So that's really the context for what we did. And so we kind of basically stopped doing advertising and set up something called Utopia Bureau. Mm-hmm. And the idea there was to kind of, okay, how can we come up with ideas that are going to help the world and the planet using our skills?
So Utopia Bureau, sort of an advertising agency for the climate or for the Earth.
Well, the thing is, to begin with, we weren't. It was meant to be across the whole of politics, right, and across the world. It was like, okay, what can we do for the economy, for society, and we were coming up with ideas, like, oh, what's the 1,000-year plan for this, and we just soon realized, well, this is all totally academic if we don't, kind of get on top of the climate crisis first and foremost. So we soon refocused on climate and obviously everything to do with it fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, before we go on and dig into communicating about climate, everyone out there who's listening, please like and subscribe, because that will actually help spread this message further, and it's free. And it will help actually, get more people informed about climate. So you can do your part right now by clicking like and subscribe. So what was there any particular thing that got you focused on climate? Any kind of something you read or something you did all of a sudden, or was it you just learned more and more until it hit you? That we have to switch here.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone in this space has been on some kind of a journey, right? And it's always interesting to kind of figure out people's, climate epiphany. Mm-hmm. What is the thing that made them? I think for me, the thing I do remember is because for a long time I kind of assumed that someone was on top of it, right?
Right.
I thought,
right,
this is a problem. It's a serious problem, but there've grown up people out there, and they're sorting it out, and they're having lots of conferences, and the first time it occurred to me that this might not be going well is when I was reading Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything.
Yeah.
And she's a great author on so many subjects, but she had one point in there in particular when she said, what we need to do is leave trillions of dollars of wealth in the ground. That's what we need to do. And so that the last time that we tried to dispossess people of that magnitude of wealth was slavery, and we ended up with the Civil War, which is still one of the bloodiest conflicts in history. And that made me realize that, this isn't actually going to be smooth sailing. The power struggles going on here are going to be huge. So that was one element. And then I guess, with the just the general feeling, personal feeling that we could be doing more, and seeing also what I think people like Greta and Extinction Rebellion were doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think in particular, at one point in London, Extinction Rebellion, one of their first big actions was taking over some bridges. And I was like, who are these guys? They've just come out of nowhere, and suddenly they have the nous, and they've got themselves together to just literally take over bridges. And I guess that gave me the feeling that there was proper agency here.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of building, as you know, there's lots of building blocks that have to come into place for people to act. They have to kind of feel the concern, but at another level, they also have to feel they've got some agency. And
Mm-hmm.
seeing that made me think that there's something to be done here. That that there are ways of acting in the world that can change the course of events. So that was kind of very interesting to me.
So going back to something you just said just a little bit ago about thinking someone was in charge. Do you think the Trump administration is actually going to help in the sense that, before Obama and Biden would say they were doing a lot on climate, even though they actually weren't doing a lot on climate, but Trump is saying, I'm not going to do anything on climate. I'm going to do as little, negative stuff as possible. Do you think that helps people get over that illusion of someone's in charge doing something?
Well, I mean, he's not helpful. That's for sure.
He's terrible in a million ways. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to say he's a good guy, but I'm just saying in that particular, getting people over this feeling that, it's such an important thing. Someone must be doing something.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also quite interesting that he is showing, and it's obviously all in the wrong direction, but he is kind of taking all sorts of levels of action that maybe Biden and Obama were too timid to take. So in that sense, he's a role model. It's a terrible sense, but
right. So next time we could maybe do it in the right direction.
If there's a next time for the good guys, then I think we should be bolder, and obviously without violating the Constitution every morning, if possible. But I think, I think that's important. I don't think this is going to happen, but the other day, it's funny, he said something about, and this is a digression, but he said something about, when he was cutting funding for wind farms, and he said something like, look, we're going to cut, all the money for wind farms, unless there's a kind of huge emergency. And that made me think, hang on a minute, why is he saying unless there's an emergency here? What, could that be lining up the U-turn of all U-turns? I doubt it, but that for a minute I thought, hang on a minute.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so you learned about climate, you switched away from your advertising career to go all in on climate, I think is the way you put it. And you're actually, and you set up Utopia Bureau, but you're doing a number of actions. And before I want to dig into one of them, the Client Science Breakthrough Project that you're working on. But before we get into that, can you just tell us what the various projects and aspects of climate that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, I think our model is to kind of come up with, kind of prototype campaigns. So if we see an opportunity to act and to persuade people, we kind of have we kind of come up with a campaign and we try it out, and then we see if it resonates. if people get behind it, if funding materializes, if the media seem to like it, because obviously that's crucial in reaching people. I mean, the first thing we did, I think we did coordinate a bit with Extinction Rebellion, and we did some work on their whistleblowing arm, which was called TruthTeller, and which we're still working on. And that it was trying to kind of get people, in particular from the fossil fuel industry, to kind of, come and tell you what is really going on behind the scenes, behind the greenwashing. So we did a lot there, and that led to kind of one of their a safety expert from Shell, Caroline Dennett, to come forward, and then we worked with other people, and that became a huge story with, I think, 200 articles worldwide. And led to other people. So that's one strand of work that's now turning into applying social pressure onto fossil fuel employees. And that's ongoing, and really just talking to them directly and trying to find levers to undermine their social license and to make them go, well, what are you really doing in this industry, in this day and age? What are you going to say to your kids? So I think that they've got a fairly easy ride of it so far. So that's one thing where we're trying to apply social norms directly. We did another campaign called Climate Call Up, which was trying to mobilize people around the idea that this is a World War II level emergency. And so using that language, which is not traditional language of the left, certainly in the UK, it's really trying to appeal to the center and the right and see if we could mobilize them around, themes of kind of, national emergency and things like that. That didn't work at all. The center right weren't bothered. So that's an example of where, it just didn't pan out. There just wasn't the reaction we anticipated. So we kind of dropped that. But we always have a few irons in the fire at various stages of progression. And I guess Climate Science Translated is the one that's gone furthest so far.
Okay, but back to the one where you tried to get the employees to leave. I read that story there. Did it go any farther than that? Did that one had a little bit of traction? You got some good publicity for that one person who left. Has it led to more?
Well, we're working on the next stage as we speak, but I think it's really to I mean, I don't want to kind of give away what we're going to do, but I think you've got to come at this from you've got to have a number of stakeholders and people of influence. I think if you turn up outside Shell with a bunch of people who they think look like hippies and know nothing about their industry, then you're not going to have influence these days. I think at the beginning it was a great strategy because they'd not seen it before. But I think now you've got to be a bit more sophisticated, and you've got to kind of find the people who to them it would be shocking that they turned up outside their offices to say, what are you doing? So I guess that's the kind of thing that the way we're thinking. We did do, beyond getting Caroline on board, we did a lot of work on LinkedIn, kind of like LinkedIn, obviously professional arena. So a lot of work on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn's quite good. You can do quite targeted advertising. So we did campaigns that are aimed specifically at Shell employees, and it said, "Dear Shell employee," and it had a personalized message for them. And that was something that, was shocking because they didn't expect you in their face in such a setting. So, and you've always got to evolve and try and find new, because people get used to it, don't they? So you've got to always create new tactics and new ways in, and then you keep moving on. Otherwise, if you don't renew, you lose traction.
So let me ask you, let's take a step back, and I'd love your opinion on why do you think the media has, and I'll give my opinion, so spectacularly failed on the subject of climate. Even today, I mean, as we cover on this channel, when we do speak with the climate science, it's getting worse faster than it was in just the last few years. Literally, it's accelerated in a dramatic way. we're seeing the impacts around the world. I mean, it's so obvious, yet it's like crickets, as we say here, chirping away, rather than any kind of serious coverage by the media. Why is that?
Well, it's the $1 trillion question, isn't it? I think there's several things. I think, particularly in the States now, some of the media is either owned or influenced strongly by people who have a stake in a very different future, or who have direct or indirect interests in fossil fuel companies. I think there's, I think in fairness, it's also quite difficult to cover, in the sense that it's a someone said it's like a long emergency.
Right.
What would we wish for? You can't have every night the anchor people screaming at you. This is it's a tricky one, but they are failing abysmally. I think there's also, I think the Don't Look Up, Adam McKay's film, just kind of nailed that satirically very well a few years ago.
We had Adam on here.
Yeah, no, and he does great work. But I think that film was very good at nailing the tone, in the sense that a lot of these outlets are there to sell you stuff, and if your people are left in a major downer, that just doesn't work. So I think there's internal corporate pressures going on. I think there's also just generally, and this isn't just the media, it's also particularly things like philanthropy. There's a kind of grown up squeamishness to not really tell, we are in such deep trouble, but it's just not in their vocabulary to kind of go, oh, we are truly screwed here.
Even among climate scientists, I have to say, some, I mean, certainly not all.
It's a bit like they're at a dinner party and they don't want to kind of, rock the boat and make everyone cry into their wine glass. There's some kind of middle class squeamishness there that is, I think is a factor.
Wow. Okay. Tell us a little bit about the Climate Science Breakthrough Project.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a good example of looking for a hypothesis and then trying to kind of do a prototype. So we kind of met a guy in the UK called Nick Aldridge, who is a kind of climate campaigner, but also has been in business and had a little bit of money aside, and thought, am I going to leave this to my kids, but on a ruined planet, or should I put a bit of it into trying to kind of make things better? And he was particularly concerned. I mean, he was watching climate scientist lectures on YouTube, and which we've all done, right? And it's in a kind of a lecture hall, and it's these slides, very complicated slides, and it goes on for like a couple of hours. And it's just a huge amount of jargon, and but equally what they're saying is terrifying,
right?
And he's like, how come this isn't getting through to people? And he said, oh, well, I've seen what you guys are doing elsewhere. How can we work together? Is there a way of helping the climate science cut through? So that was interesting to us. So we kind of worked on it, and we created the idea of climate science translated, which was really to answer that question. How come the climate science is not cutting through? So we kind of, I guess, and for those of your viewers who don't know the format, it's literally pairing up a climate scientist and a well-known comedian in a 4-minute clip, where the climate scientist, tells you the science, and the comedian translates it into no BS English.
I do have one here. I could
have one in.
We could run one. I'm a little concerned sometimes YouTube blocks Well, they don't block, but I guess all the money from my show will go to you. I guess if that's what happens.
There's no money at our end, I'm afraid to say.
But should we just put one on and just for a minute?
Play a minute or so just to give the.
So let's see if we can do this here.
Let's make this climate crisis a climate crisis-isn't.
Hi, I'm Michael Oppenheimer, professor of geosciences at Princeton University.
Hi, I'm David Cross, and I am not a scientist, so you can trust me. Joking.
The climate crisis is no longer a matter of scientific projections or partisan politics. It's well and truly here. Heat records are being broken all around the world. In fact, last year was the hottest year since the industrial era began.
Translation, the shit is hitting the fan. And the fan is on maximum.
Millions of us have experienced extreme weather events ourselves.
There we go. Oops, sorry. Let's get back to us here. There we go. Okay. So so that's an example of the kind of thing.
Yeah. So basically, the we've done 4 in the UK, and this is our first US film. But we basically the idea is not that you're too dumb to understand the scientist, or that the science, that scientists are terrible communicators. The idea is that people don't respond to data. We just don't. What we respond to is stories and a narrative. So there's a temptation to kind of go, oh, but if people knew about this thing and this projection and this thing, they would all rise and be. That's not how it works. I think you need a narrative framework for it to resonate emotionally. And so that in a sense, the job of the comedian is to make you feel it and understand it properly, viscerally, ideally, as opposed to intellectually. And also it's supposed to be funny to watch, right? Because
it gets you to watch it in the first place.
We again, I mean, this is one thing from our advertising background is we know how difficult it is to get people to watch what you want them to watch, right? They've got busy lives, they've got a million things to do, they've got kids shouting at them, they're shouting at their kids, they're shouting at each other. It's a nightmare. So to get people to engage with something is a tall order, and you've really got to kind of give them something for them to do it. Also, a lot of people, climate science, they'd watch that with a gun to their heads. To be honest, it's in itself. It's if there wasn't an emergency, would we really know all this stuff? No, we would not, right? We'd be doing other stuff with our lives. So so it's not about dumbing it down. It's just kind of trying to get the comedian to extract the nugget and the core of what the scientist is saying and what it really means. And I guess the other thing it's trying to do, and you can't tell from that. I mean, obviously, people could watch the films in their entirety, is to have a narrative that goes from science to action. So it's not just saying, oh, this is the science and these are projections and this is bad. I think you have to dispel certain mental blocks and frameworks that a lot of people have. So, for example, the first one that Professor Oppenheimer was doing there was kind of urgency. A lot of people think, oh yes, there's global warming, there's a climate problem, but it'll hit in, people talk about 2050. That's when it's so the urgency is the first thing you need to be aware of. Then there's things like proximity. We certainly, those of us who are a bit older, when this really rose to attention in the 90s, and even since, it was kind of all about the polar bears and the coral reefs and some island that I mean, terrible for them, but not our problem. And so a lot of people still have that. I mean, there was a BBC documentary last year, and by a scientific journalist, and when it got to what are the impacts, cut to the Arctic. Cut to the Arctic. What are you talking about? So you've got to make people realize that it's going to affect them directly.
Right.
So that's and now, not later. So that's very important. And then, I mean, there's a range of things like that people have in their heads. I mean, another one is that it's a personal issue. It's down to your carbon footprint. So, if you think, oh, it's just down to my recycling or my usage of what kind of straws, or even buying an EV, that's not helpful. What if you've got to realize this is a government level emergency. Right. So all these things need to be kind of fitted into a narrative, so that you can then take action. I mean, there's others very important ones too. I think hope is a tricky concept. I think that we should talk about, but there has to be a positive in there, right? Because if there's not a positive vision of what we could do, which there is, right? We've got renewables, right? If we didn't have renewables, we'd be in deep trouble. We are in deep trouble, but we'd be in an impossible situation. So you've got to point people towards a positive outcome. Otherwise, they don't have agency. So all those things lead up at the end to a call to action to do something now urgently. And that's from the scientists and from the comedian.
Okay. By the way, I should point out to everyone listening that there are links in the description to Utopia Bureau and to Climate Science Breakthrough videos and the YouTube channel, for example, where you can watch all of them. So please do, and I think you'll see what Ben's talking about there. By the way, do you know George Marshall over in your side of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I think, I mean, that his I think a lot of our narrative is drawn from his books, right?
His book, yeah, I helped him with his book. I helped him get it published, and actually, I'm the one who told him to write it because he gave this lecture, and it was like an incredible lecture, and he was just giving it to some class in the UK somewhere, and I ended up using his material in my talk, especially the psychology part, and it was like so good. And I said, I got in touch with him and said, "Wow, this is great." He says, "Yeah, I was thinking of writing a book." "Yeah, okay," and I hooked him up, publisher, and went from there. In fact, I named the book, but so many things he had. You talked about polar bears being a terrible symbol for global warming. First of all, like it's like something that should be on a refrigerator, not on global warming, and also the fact that you said that we don't act on data, we act on emotions, and so, which is also true.
And I mean, he's amazing, but he also goes out and speaks to a lot of people and kind of gathers a lot of expertise, and I think he's got another book in the works, which is going to be interesting. Yeah.
So how long has this project been going on, and how have you been able to measure its effectiveness so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first film came out maybe a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. So we started with 2 films in the UK, and that led to another 2, I think, later in the year. And then we've this American launch has been cooking for a while. It was going to be in time for the election, but then someone pointed out that was illegal, so we kind of delayed it. But the stuff we've researched in the UK seems to be working pretty well. I think we did some groups where I think people were 87.5% of people were more likely to take action, which was pretty good. We've just actually finished some early research in the US, and it's working very well on salience, in the sense that when you ask people what are you going to vote on, and they go, well, I'm going to vote on guns and on health and on it zooms up the list of what you're going to vote on, which is crucial, and which is the aim in the US.
That's true.
So its early indications are quite good, and I think the other indicators for us, which are very important, are because there's no media money behind this. These are not paid adverts. This is stuff that we put on the internet and PR, and either it kind of finds an audience or it doesn't. And the UK ones ended up with 10 million views, which for no media money, which was pretty good, and had quite a lot of PR.
I'm looking here online, and it says one of your bigger ones with Jonathan Pye, 55,000 views on YouTube. So where else are the views coming from?
Yeah, I mean, in the olden days, YouTube was the measure, but it's split completely since. I mean, a lot of the views of the first UK ones were on Twitter.
Okay.
Actually, which by now is dead to us. We've stuck them on there, but for probably many reasons, that's not doing anything now. So it's a tricky landscape. But no, we're on half a dozen different platforms, and they all have their different metrics. But we also, again, the idea was meant to be media friendly. So a big test for us is, can we get it into, it got covered by The Guardian, for example. So
but The Guardian's covering most climate things. They're the one that's doing it, right?
That's not the goal. So that's not unexpected, right?
Okay.
But for example, we got Joe Brand, who's a very famous comedian here, and Mark Maslin, who's a top climate scientist here, on breakfast TV in the UK.
Oh, okay.
Which is Good Morning Britain, it's called, and a lot of the time when they covered climate, they would have someone from Just Stop Oil who's like 17 and a half, and they would just kind of insult them for 10 minutes and tell them so it wasn't necessarily a sympathetic program, but because we got them on there and they kind of knew Joe Brand's a national treasure, so they had a very friendly chat about it, and Mark could answer the scientific questions, and Joe could do the jokes and the breakfast banter, and they did and so they had a really positive reception.
Wow.
And then half an hour later, a government minister came on the program, and the presenters had a go at him for not doing enough about climate. So that's an example of what this is intended to achieve, is to reach beyond the bubble.
That's great.
And in the US, we had a slightly, we got David Cross and Michael Oppenheimer on CBS morning breakfast.
Oh, you did?
News or whatever, which is the same sort of scenario. It's and again, a very, very receptive anchors going, thank God you're doing this, and this is at last. So that's the aim of the campaign, and so those are important metrics to us, because if you just have something that you show people and they go, yes, that's fine, but you've got to have a format that has its own distribution and earns it. Otherwise, what's the point?
Well, that's actually quite impressive. I like that that's gone beyond the YouTube videos and getting it into the media itself. I'm still stuck though with the fact that it sounds like you're making progress in this thing, but in general, the public is so far behind, and they don't really know what's going on, and the media isn't telling them, and public leaders aren't leading, and then there's folks like you and me and a bunch of others trying to get attention, and it's very difficult. What other suggestions do you have for maybe not even things that you're going to do, but that you hope that others do, that would help get the public engaged on climate?
Well, our way of doing things is, if we think of something, we go and do it. So that's that's very much how we're wired.
That's good.
I mean, it's very difficult, and you kind of you make, in our case, you make films that you think, how can anyone listen to these professors and the comedian telling it like it is, and swearing profusely in the process, and not man the barricades, right? And then you get research back, and they kind of go, oh well, this shifted the needle by 8% upwards, and that's a phenomenal result. And you're like, well, but that's I was kind of hoping for 60%. So it's very difficult, but this is the world we live in. I think it's very tricky. One of our advisors is Dana Fisher. I think you.
Oh yeah, we had Dana. Yeah.
And she, her view is that climate shocks are what's going to make the difference, right? That we're going to have to, which is a slightly depressing scenario, but the idea that we're going to have to wait for some huge climate event to kind of make people go to the next level and appreciate that this is the proverbial has truly hit the fan. And
Yeah.
I think there's something in it. Equally, I'm not even sure that's necessarily going to do it.
Well, it is hitting the fan to a lot of people in a lot of places. By the way, I don't disagree with Dana, because it's been my experience doing this for 20 years. But I'm sort of saying the same things. We knew 20 years ago what to say. No one listened at all. And now that there's more discussion on it, I wouldn't say more action, but more discussion, I think that's almost all to do with the fact that people have personally experienced climate changes, some shocks, some just changes, and there will be more. Of course, the problem with climate change is that it doesn't ever get better. It only, if you're lucky, stops getting worse. So by the time you get so bad that you're willing to act, you're pretty screwed at that point.
You're pretty screwed. I mean, the other thing is it doesn't necessarily follow. I mean, look at the LA wildfires. I think there was a perception in the movement that, oh, hang on a minute, now suddenly people are going to wake up and look at this. But it's funny, because at the time we were busy casting for this film, and we thought, okay, here we go. LA-based comedians are all going to be on board for this. Not at all. Well,
that's what George Marshall found that too, right? He went after Hurricane Sandy, and he found that people were less inclined to talk about climate change after being impacted by climate change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a weird thing going on, wasn't there? There's been some study where people have been say flooded or burnt out, refuse to believe it's climate change, because that means it could happen again. If it was a one-off freak incident, that's just a much easier thing to live with than, oh my God, what are you going to do? Rebuild? This is the way it is now. They refuse to believe it. So I mean, there's a lot of kind of, which is what George is great at. There's a lot of kind of cognitive dissonance going on here that we kind of have to navigate. I agree with you that I'm worried that we're just nudging, as opposed to just kind of coming up with something groundbreaking that suddenly changes the whole game. I don't know that communication on its own is going to do that, but I think we have to be ready if there is a climate shock, or any climate shock there is, to make the most of it in a way, in telling people this is something you need to use and as your climate epiphany, in a way.
So one thing that I'm also hopeful that these things people will get the message ahead of time. And one area I thought might be helpful is AMOC collapse, because the AMOC is like yes or no. It's not this 2 versus 2.2 versus, a number that you don't even know what that means when you hit. But AMOC collapse, especially in the UK, where you're going to lose 2/3 of your arable land, you're going to have, turn into Alaska all of a sudden, and on and on. I mean, just the impacts in the UK are incredible. I don't know what's going on in the UK, but has there been any discussion of that in the last couple of years, much more research says this could happen like in 2050. At the beginning of it, by the way, it's not really the end of it, but the beginning of it in 2050, or the tipping point. And that's very soon. And it's very specific. And it has very dramatic, day after tomorrow, which was like not real at all, but, impacts. And so has there been discussion at all in the UK? I'm not over there, but has this gotten any traction at all?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we featured it in our first film with Bill Maguire.
Oh, okay.
He's very, very vocal on these things. I mean, we think it's got huge potential as well. It has been mentioned, it has been even in the right-wing press, because even though they're not pro-climate, they can't resist a good kind of day after tomorrow type story and ice age. But have people, again, it goes back to what we're trying to achieve, have people emotionally registered what, it's a huge thing. I mean, it would kill the country. It would be an absolute catastrophe.
Like, by the way, not just UK, by the way.
Yeah, not just the UK,
everything, everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So I think that there's more to do, and I think that's one of the things in the pipeline for us. Certainly in the UK, I think it's a very useful lever potentially. I mean, I guess again the thing is, do people believe it? Right. And this is the chicken and egg issue that if people, again, a lot of people assume if this were true, then the government would be doing something about it. And so because they think it's, and therefore they discount it and they don't apply pressure because of that, and therefore the government can get away with not taking it into account. But we certainly we're working on it, and we have a number of irons in the fire on that front.
That's good. So I want to get back and get your thoughts on, you mentioned hope, and that you have to have hope that if you do take action, that you can make things, better than they would otherwise be. And I'm certainly very hopeful about that. But there's also, I don't know, we talk about it a lot here, where there's climate scientists that the joke is they're smoking hopium. In that they lead with hope, and then when you're done, you go, well, why do I need to take action? You made it sound like everything could be okay as long as we, and then it's always as long as we cut all our fossil fuel emissions next year, which of course is never going to happen. But what's your thought on this hope versus fear question?
Well, I think I've got very strong feelings on it. I think hope is good. I think hopium is a disaster, and again, I think you see it. I don't know in the US so much, but in the UK certainly, and in philanthropy as well. There's this absolute reluctance to do anything that could be portrayed as doomist,
right?
And I think doomism is a bit of a straw man, to be honest with you. They do these studies that say, oh well, we tested a few lines of approach in our focus groups, and we said, oh, this is all doom and gloom, and people didn't like that. And then we said, oh, but it's all going to be rosy, and people prefer that. Well, of course, but those are not the only options. You can convey how dire the situation is, but also say this is why you need to act. As long as you have a positive level of agency and action and a credible pathway to that, then I think it's a no-brainer. And I think you're being dishonest with people if you're trying to sugarcoat. And I think people feel that. People aren't stupid. People don't feel like you're telling them what's really going on. And also, I think it leads to some quite boring messaging. You're always trying to find something positive about some kind of, commune that shares their crops, and it just doesn't feel. It just feels dissonant with the reality of what's out there. So I think I think positive honesty with a strong bias to action is what's needed, and not trying to kind of sugarcoat the pill. Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit about what, I mean, without giving too much away, I guess, of what some of your future projects are going to be, or things we should look forward to?
Well, I think I mean, we're going to hopefully make more climate science translated videos. I think we'd love to. It's not easy to get famous comedians on board, believe it or not. You've got to, and again, this speaks to the nature of the problem. Particularly their agents. It's incredible who in theory are, read the Guardian, etc. Will still sometimes go, but he's already doing something for guide dogs for the blind this year, and he's already got his issues for charity. And you're like, this is not charity. This is not an issue. This is right. Our collective survival. I mean, that's something that drives me mad. So and I think in the US as well, with Trump, there's an element of apprehension, right? I mean, we'd love to have, for example, Nikki Glaser, who's if you know her, she's very she just doesn't take any prisoners. But I think she spoke recently of how people think they're going to be on a list if they, and again, she's extremely frank. There is that kind of apprehension, but I think now that people can see, oh look, David Cross did it, he's got nothing but good feedback. Hopefully it'll help us get us someone with even more potential for kind of distribution.
We'll get someone like Jimmy Kimmel or Stephen Colbert. They're already on the list, so
yeah.
No, they're going full tilt.
I mean, you name them, we've asked them, so
okay.
we'll just keep going.
Okay.
But yeah, and I think we're obviously guided by the scientists we work with to some extent.
Okay.
I mean, they have to tell the broad story. We're not going to go into, like, if they're into the ocean, we're not going to make it all about the oceans. Although the ocean, we would talk about, obviously the ocean is very important. But I think, for example, Michael Oppenheimer is not that keen on tipping points, for example. I think I think that's a very important subject, and AMOC is part of that. So I think we look potentially to talk about that in the next one, for example.
Okay.
And yeah, in the UK, again, similar story. There's a lot of potential around AMOC in particular, to try and kind of raise awareness and get people acting. It's a bit tricky in the UK at the moment because, in theory, our government is pro-climate, and when the Tories, the Conservatives, the right wing were in power, every comedian wanted to do it because everyone hates them, and so they were, Now there's a sense that, oh well, we'd better let these guys get on with it and not criticize them too much. But I think that's fading slightly now.
I had a joke for the UK government when they were like saying, yeah, we're going to be the leaders in climate, and they're opening new gas fields, and it goes like this. It says it comes as a surprise to many, but it turns out that you can't decrease fossil fuel emissions by increasing them. Which is like,
let's take that. Let's take that.
All right,
we'll send you a
use that one.
Yeah.
Now we're going to bring Stacy Randecker in as our co-mod, who's going to ask a question, and then also lead us to some of the questions on YouTube. And if you are watching live and you have a question for Ben, please put it in the comments and preface it with question : so that we can easily spot it. So here we go. Let me invite Stacy in. Hey, wait, let me get Ben to be there we go.
Okay.
Welcome, Stacy.
Hey, Stacey.
Thanks, Dan. Hey, Ben. Thanks for being here. And I just, well, I want to offer up my services. Like, so if any of those comedians are worried about getting on a list, I'm on all the lists. Like, I have zero to lose. So you can put me, we can do between two wind turbines or something
Yeah.
like that. And they can write it and I can deliver it. And yeah, I'm sure it'll go viral. No doubt.
This is all good material. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So the one thing I wanted to just comment, I know, Dan, we've been through this, the whole why is the media failing? And because it is such a big deal. And the whole idea the pet issues, it's like, oh, well, we've done the guide dogs this year already. It's like it's like people, this is the everything, if you have children or you care about anything beyond yourself, you need to care about this. But why? And I think you're doing such a brilliant job of getting people to understand why it's important. The issue is, what do people do about it? So it's almost like a hand in glove thing. Like you watch the David Cross piece, and it's like, yes, the fan is on high, people. But then what's next? How do they follow up on it? Because why people don't care, why the media doesn't care. It is so unbelievably inconvenient. I'm the bike girl. And so getting people to stop driving, to take transit, to stop flying, buying, consuming, in all these things, that is what we in the West are propelled by. And so the media won't cover it because they'll piss off advertisers. The people don't want to do it because they just don't have any other way to, like, the screaming kids need to eat, and I don't have time to make whatever. So I'm going to go drive here and buy the whatever and put it in their cake holes. And, it's just, I don't know. It's this whole thing of how do we get everything to change?
Well, I heard in your thing there, Stacey, that the question might be like, what's the call to action in your videos for people once they get engaged by watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Stacey, that's all extremely valid, and also quite overwhelming, right? Because at one level, you're right. It's our entire civilization and culture that needs to be rethought, and so I guess we've chosen to focus on collective political action, right? Because that's something that is kind of tangible, and people can start doing. I mean, it depends a bit on the context, what we ask for in particular. I think in the UK, we were trying to kind of get people who cared to be active. So to join a protest or to complain to their bank about their fossil fuel investments, to actually, take some kind of action. In the US, it's more about making people more aware as they vote that this is a huge issue that they should be voting on. So I think it depends what, and so our call to action in the US is contact your congressman or your elected representative and tell them that this is something that you actually really care about, and you're not going to let it slip. I mean, the US at the moment is a bit of a tricky political context, right? It is quite difficult. But I think that, I mean, and another reason we focus on collective political action, and something in the narrative that I should also point out, which I think is quite important, is that we do, again, I mean, it's very complex, but we do point to a villain, which is the fossil fuel industry and lobby. That we are at one level, we are all to blame for our consumption habits, and this involves everyone. But I think that there are bad actors in the system who are fighting us at the moment, and have done since the 70s, and exert a huge influence on government. I mean, at the moment they're in government, so it's very clear. But even in the UK, behind the scenes are very active. And so I think if we can focus people on seeing that and becoming angry as a result, then I think that is actually a prime way of motivating people to action.
Okay. Hey, I see one question from the comments, and that is, if there are other folks in other countries that want to use your formula and things like that, have you done anything to work with others outside the UK or outside the US? Maybe in different languages and things like that, to use your techniques to.
We've looked into it. I mean, we get approached. We've had a good chat with people from Singapore. People in France wanted to do it. I mean, I think it's all, great. It's actually quite a lot of hard work, and it's good that we make it look easy. But in fact, it's quite a lot of work involved, and we provided, the template for how to do it. But so far, no one's followed up on that to make one. They're not cheap, because we specifically wanted to give these some kind of social authority. So, going back to these climate scientists in their lecture halls, filmed with low light, that's not going to scare anyone in power, right? You kind of go, these guys, they're freaking out, but no one cares.
Right.
If you make it, if you give it the same production values as anything that the other side is producing, you're immediately saying, oh, hang on, there's some money behind this, there's some power, there's some social authority. Actually, this has got more kind of authority than just a kind of a cheap thing shot on someone's phone. So in that sense, it's a rod for our own backs, but I think that's quite important. So far, people haven't done it. I'd love for them to do it. I'd love a French version. There's a lot of brilliant. I'm actually part French. Don't hold it against me. But there's some brilliant comedians in France these days. Weirdly, they didn't used to be. So I think they could do a good job. I don't know about the Singapore scene. I think there's more of a free speech issue there, but I'm sure there's interesting stuff going on.
Is there
Adam McKay is trying to do, in a sense, what you're doing with the high production values, his Yellow Dot Studios, and I don't know, maybe you should speak with him.
We know we know Stacey at Yellow Dot, and we do talk. But I guess we're both so busy and we have so many projects on our slate that but yeah, who knows? They do great stuff.
Let's go to Eli for the next question, and then Stacey, I'll get back to you for some more YouTube questions.
Sounds good.
Eli, hi. What's your question for Ben?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. So part of the problem, and you alluded to this, is actionability, and a lot of people confronted with how bad things are become overwhelmed, and that in itself, leads people into the doomer and activism pipeline. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on combining it, with messages of where we can get traction just beyond, calling your legislators, etc., your representatives, and B, in particular, a lot of people who are climate aware have fallen into technology is the problem mindset, when things are at a scale now that there are no solutions that can do much quickly enough that don't involve one kind of technology or another.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, can you just clarify
the first question?
What you mean by the technology issue? Do you mean people are thinking there is a technological solution?
Well, okay, so many people, and you can even find this in Greta's discussion. It's understandable why that talking about technology is somehow avoiding the issue or kicking the can down the road. That we should just be doing the things that we can do right away. when in fact, I mean, that would have been great in 1990. But right now we're at a point where stopping fossil fuels 100% immediately might not spare us from going over tipping points, for example.
So I think Ben was talking about, we talk a lot here about the triad of climate action, which is get rid of fossil fuel emissions, number one. Number two, remove past emissions, that's carbon dioxide removal. And three, use sunlight reflection methods to cool the earth temporarily while we do the 1 and 2. And there's a lot of objections to the second two because, well, they'll stop you from doing number one, or that technology
Moral
got us
hazard.
into this problem in the first place. So why are you proposing more technology? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think both. Well, I think they're slightly different, but I think I do occasionally get emails from friends who are not in this space and who kind of go, "Oh, have you seen this? This kind of blog about this new form of carbon removal technology, and isn't this the solution?" And I mean, I certainly haven't seen it yet, and we've looked into quite a lot of this, and it's all, as far as I'm concerned, I think it's, yeah, by all means, someone should work on it for sure, and no one would be more thrilled than I if someone pulled a rabbit out of the hat and solved it. But it seems like pie in the sky at the moment, and for the foreseeable future. So we're not, and again, the villains of the piece are using that as a get out of jail card, right? So there's a huge, as you say, huge moral hazard there. I think the geoengineering piece is similar, and in a way it's tricky because even some climate scientists now, I think Jim Hansen in particular is talking about geoengineering. I mean, it may, and I think in the UK, for example, government agencies are researching it and experimenting with it behind the scenes without really telling anyone. I think this is a debate that needs to be out there because I think it's a huge moral hazard, but also it's a huge physical hazard.
But isn't it a moral hazard? Because, I mean, so put aside there's a moral hazard in that if people think this is available, they'll keep doing the other thing. But that also really is another way of saying we'll never take climate action seriously, and we're just going to continue doing what we're doing, and we'll look for any excuse to continue doing it. That's number one. But the other one is the actual physical impacts that without it, we will go over 2 degrees for sure, as Jim Hansen says. And by the way, I don't see how anyone could deny that at this point. And also, we'll also pass these tipping points like AMOC. And so you also have an actual physical choice of, I call it catastrophe, going over 2 degrees or not. And so there's that as well. But so there, yeah, but everyone's so worried that by having a temporary solution to stop catastrophe and suffering, it's going to allow the fossil fuel industry to do what they're continuing to do, which just means no one ever thinks we're ever going to tell them to stop it, I guess. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So
that's the moral hazard part, is that you don't believe in action, really. You don't believe that serious action will ever happen.
Here it is, Ben. You need a 4-person video, 2 comedians, 2 scientists debating exactly this.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. Go back to your first point, which was that I mean, we actually asked Jim Hansen if he wanted to do a video. Yeah. I think he said he was too busy finishing his book or something.
Yep.
But the geoengineering thing would have been a problem for us, not just because we're not convinced, but also because it makes for just a much more complicated story. If one of the barriers to action is complexity and feeling overwhelmed, and this is overwhelming, and as we've seen during the course of this conversation, it touches on everything, and it's on personal action, and on what is the way of influencing the political context and in different countries, and what about geoengineering? What about it's a huge all-enveloping problem, that scientific, cultural, social, economic, everything. So no wonder people are under their duvet, right? So unless you carve out a narrative that is true to the facts but suggests a way forward, then I think you'll end up with people not doing much. So that's the way we that's our hypothesis.
Okay.
Anyway, but if there's a way of telling the full complexity of it in 4 minutes and getting people to act, then I'd love to. I'd love to do that. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one for sure.
Okay, so let's move to Stacy. One more YouTube comment, question, and then I think we'll call it a wrap there. So.
Oh my gosh, Dan.
Well, I didn't see that many that were actual questions. A lot of comments, tons of comments in there. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, but I think comments are informative, and there are questions, because I've been calling all along, and you get cut off after your half hour. So, well, the one thing I did want, some of the things in the suggestion box here are: have you considered Benny Hill type comedy and scantily clad young women pitching why climate change is important and should be focused on? I don't know.
I wonder where the Benny Hill reference comes from, because weirdly it was very. Does everyone know Benny Hill?
I do.
Age, maybe. I don't think younger people do anymore.
He's not flavor of the times anymore. No. But he was like a very kind of rotund British comedian who, I mean, very slapstick, and he just went round with women in bikinis, and he'd have this little bald dude next to him, and he'd slap him on the head. I mean, it was so wrong. And it was actually really popular in France and Germany, because that was the level of humor they enjoyed. So I think no is the answer. And so the interesting point is that different types of humor are relevant here. It's not, we can't just work with, I mean, I think slapstick doesn't work, because I don't quite know how to do a slapstick interpretation of carbon capture. Maybe, but also what doesn't work is, which you still see a lot of around climate, is cynicism. You like even like Netflix, and we know the sustainability people there, and they're great, but sometimes they'll put out a thing, climate comedy, and you'll see some comedian, taking the mickey out of vegans or sandals, or go, or sometimes a joke that the implicit message will be, well, what's the point? We're all doomed. And that's funny in a cynical way, but that's not good for us, right? We don't want people to kind of laugh and then go, oh, well, we're all screwed, forget it, I'm going to go back to pizza.
But who's playing the rotund skirt chasing man? Couldn't we AI generate someone who might be in a position of power these days, who's noted for that? I don't know. I think it'd be hilarious.
Is this from Yellow Dot?
No, he's an orange-ish complexion, maybe,
Okay.
Anyway, and then the other was,
there are people doing that kind of thing.
To bring it up to date would be Borat Sexy Time in his mankini or something like that. That's delivering news on climate.
I think we have an interesting group out there in the live chat.
There's definitely a market for a different tone, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I have to say, as I started off this discussion, saying that we have climate scientists on, and we get into the details, and people watching this program want that. I mean, those are the people who want to watch those lectures that you were talking about that will bore everyone else. We try to, by the way, make it more understandable here. We try to, use English language rather than scientific language and that kind of thing. And I say we have it's I think it's fascinating. It's scary as hell, but we know all we need to know, and we have the solutions to move forward. what we're talking about today, what we did talk about today, I think is so important, and you are doing really important work. It needs to spread much farther, but trying these things out is so super important, and there's so much more we could talk about. But I want to thank you so much.
Oh, just one last one. Sorry.
Okay, one more.
Okay, sorry. This is just a tack on from me. The you were saying about money and getting and like the comedians have already committed to, guide dogs and such, wealthy people and philanthropy, sort of giving their funds to help further your work. Have you considered taking your David Cross or what other ones you might have in, and then layering on a, hey, wealthy people, like, shaking them by the ankles and seeing what coins fall out, if they virtually, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I think we do have some funding, but hopefully this will trigger more. But it is an uphill struggle. I think what is helpful is to see something that seems to be working, right? That's the best way to unlock more money. But going back to the guy that we've kind of co-founded this with, in a way he's the right model. He's not a billionaire for sure, but the choice he's facing is, do I just leave all this cash to my kids, but the planet is not certainly if AMOC happens, they're not going to be having a great old time of it. Or do I invest something now to try and prevent the worst outcomes? And I can't see personally, I don't understand people with money who don't think or haven't thought along those lines.
I work
see the logic.
I work with high net worth families, and I don't know how. It's like they know my bag and what I'm interested in, and having something that I could turn over that is quick, funny, and tells them where to write the damn check. Like, I just think that would be something, because not everyone takes the leap that the individual you're working with did. Maybe their children are younger. They just haven't been approached, and they've given to all the other things that knock on their door, or as people in their circles do. But having something like that they were able then to, like, oh yeah, I get it. And
But everyone can be in denial too, though. I mean, it's easy.
Take 10% of the money you spend on the bunker and put it into this.
Yes, that.
Okay,
Do
there we
that.
go.
Do that. Send it to me.
If they're spending it on the bunker, then they're engaged. They know what the problem is. So, Ben, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I thought it was a fascinating discussion. This is, I think, some of the best of Climate Chat is when we speak to people like you and David Fenton and Adam McKay and George Marshall are the ones who are trying to figure out how to communicate with the public, which is, it's the key thing, and maybe the hardest thing of all of them, but so important. So thank you for the work you're doing. I'm looking forward to seeing the future stuff. And again, for everyone watching, there are links in the description, both to Utopia Bureau as well as to the YouTube channel for the Climate Science Breakthrough videos, which actually, by the way, include, besides the comedian ones, you also have little explainers on all the climate myths I see in there as well. So there's other things in there people can watch as well. So
yeah, we did a bit of we haven't talked about our Truth Social campaign, by the way. That's a separate thing. Maybe next time. That's not going very well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that next time. Great. And thank you, everyone. And thanks everyone for coming. And remember, like and subscribe, because that actually does spread the work we're doing out to more people. So please do that. It's free and easy to do, and you can do your part that way. Thanks, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.